Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Tracy Bennett. In studio with me are certified financial planners Stephen Lucan and Tony Payne. What's up, guys? We're back at it.
Back at it.
Done
what are we
some
talking about
research
today?
For you. I'm going to try to throw you for a loop here. So, got the everyman point of view.
We got spicy
Every
Tracy
person.
today. Okay.
Yeah, spicy
All right.
Tracy.
Oh, good.
Good luck with that.
Uh-oh.
We talk a lot about estate planning. We're going to be very specific with our topic today. Life changes that should trigger an estate plan. So estate planning, I think, until I started working for the company, estate planning was not much on the radar. We had the basic estate planning, but there's a lot more to the conversation, and that's kind of what I want to pick your brains about. And most people don't necessarily ignore it. They just don't realize, and I myself was one of those, the basic stuff. But if you've got extenuated circumstances or family needs or amassed a decent wealth or vacation home or whatever, there's a lot more to it. So it starts earlier than people think. So I want to kind of go into what it is first and why it's so important.
Okay. Well, at first, it's a transfer of your assets when you die. And that's why when somebody should implement an estate plan, a lot of people wait until maybe they're married or have children, or they don't at all. But it really starts once you reach adulthood. Even it could start before adulthood, right? And I'm sure Tony will get into that. Mm-hmm. But it's an important part just to make sure any wealth you've accumulated transfers as you wish. And that's the best way, I would say, as a foundation.
Talk about the documents that are needed. If I'm a client and I'm asking you, you're sitting there and you're going, I probably should have done this earlier. What is your response to that? How do you get people started?
Well, first, we're talking about it today. So that's always a good reaction. We're talking about it. You're paying attention to it. We're doing something. We'll talk later, but there's also the downside of not doing anything and taking advantage early of, I know what I want. I can take my time. I can lay out my wishes the way I want to. That's really important. So on the document side, not being attorneys, but knowing enough here to guide a little bit to work with attorneys, the basic one is a will. You want to have that done, basically. That's the first starting point of, and where's my stuff going? And then beyond that, there's other documents, too, that can come into play that we think of estate planning, but they're really related to maybe end of life, too, whether it's a power of attorney for healthcare or a living will. So those are also documents that almost regardless of your wealth or age, they could come into play with a bad scenario. So those would be some of the basics I start to think of. I don't know, Stephen, if you think of any others.
Yeah, the big one is, I always say that the most important thing is do it when times are good, not reactionary. So Tony mentioned like healthcare, right? Unfortunately, how many times people get unfortunate news or bad news from their doctors, and then they have to scramble and worry about their estate plan. Do it when times are good. So then if something does come up where you're given a curveball in life, that the last thing you have to worry about is your estate plan. That's
a great point. And it's the antithesis, I think, of what everybody does.
Right.
The normal person is more, I think we as humans tend to be, unless you're really raised that way, to be more reactive than proactive. So that's great advice.
And that's the foundation of financial planning, is to create a proactive approach. Mm-hmm. So do it when times are good.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this, and it underlies all of estate planning, is the idea that we're talking about mortality. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something we all kind of duck our heads in the sand on sometimes, and it's hard to think about getting older and, I might be slowing down, or all these things that are real, and the idea of, I've got to face it. And again, it's never too early to face it. We all don't know what's out there for us. So that's what we're trying to convey.
Facing it, that's poignant, because living in this environment, I still struggle. With those conversations with my family, with my kids.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah.
And I've been through, as we all probably, everybody has, but circumstances where you sit and go, man, I just never want my kids to go through that. Mm-hmm. So I want to juke and talk about the life events that trigger it. So what would be the first and biggest life event that would trigger an estate plan requirement?
Well, I always say start in the simplest terms. You talk about birth or death, marriage, divorce, right? So birth of a child, those are a trigger. Any major life event, it could be even a new job or a windfall. There's so many different situations, but I think the first one might be even adulthood,
Yeah.
right? It starts with
point.
adulthood.
Yeah.
When you hit age 18 or 21, whatever time you're out of the house, again, are you thinking about your mortality? Never. Right. And how many 18-year-olds even think about it? They don't. So maybe it comes from the parental side where you're as a parent, you're encouraging, let's get it done. Don't worry about it. So that's what really, if you're asking when does it start, I would say it starts with your adulthood.
Yeah, and I mean, I know somebody who had they were scared into creating the documents. They had their adult child ended up in the emergency room, and they weren't allowed back to see the child because there was no power of attorney set up, no
Right.
documentation. So if something had happened,
Right.
the parent wouldn't have been able to see the child, and that's terrifying. That was the catalyst for me to go to my guys, and say, guess what we're going to
Right.
do?
Right. Exactly.
That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about marriage first. Let's hit the marriage spectrum. So tell people why getting married changes who can make decisions for you if nothing else feels different.
Typically, just by the laws of the state, now that you've been married, there's some defaults that may come into play that overrode what your initial wishes might have been. Maybe there was some shared property in the family or something where you knew a clear intent was what mom or dad's wishes were. Now you've commingled assets, something like that. That can complicate things a little bit. There's other flavors of that. But, I think beyond that,
the one I remember, this was when I just started financial planning, is the woman's name was Terry Schiavo. Somehow it's ingrained in my head.
I remember that.
Right? She was in a coma for like a decade. It might even have been a long time where the husband was, saying one thing and her parents were saying another, and she had no estate plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it became a huge court battle on whether or not she should get life support and so forth. And it was awful to see, and just knowing what the family's going through. So marriage is, okay, who's going to assist if you're unable to assist? Is it your spouse or is it your parents?
Right.
Or even siblings?
Right. Or kids.
Right. And then the courts, you're dealing with courts. And who wants that? I don't think anybody wants that.
Yeah. And especially if you're in a second marriage or if you're not married and you've been with your spouse for a long time, I would assume that you should have some strong documentation in place there too.
And I think I'm talking to someone specific now, but also think about marriage where you don't feel married. Maybe it's that extended separation. So the idea of that person gets to make decisions for you by default, unless you may have overrode something, there might be an incentive not to allow that to be the case anymore. Just saying that out loud. I don't know if that seems relevant to anyone.
Ooh, that's uncomfortable.
Right.
All right. So let's talk about kids turning planning into responsibility. So why is naming guardians one of the decisions people avoid? I've always wondered that because for me, it was like the first thing I did.
Yeah.
The panic.
Maybe not knowing who, right. And who would be acceptable to be the guardian of something.
Nobody's going to do it the way you do it.
I'll chime in too, dare I say.
You could go many directions.
And that coupled discussion of in-laws, which one? I mean, that alone is already going to set things off perhaps, or who lives closer, or maybe there's a brother or sister of someone's. I mean, it's a tricky conversation where you might think, well, there's a family default or something, but with planning, you can override that. And again, it takes having the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aging parents in the sandwich generation. This is a big topic for us in financial planning in all ways. How does estate planning change when you're thinking about your kids and your parents at the same time? What comes to mind?
Meaning your estate plan when you have to factor in your parents and kids? Well, are you going to financially care for your parents? Is that what your question is? Yeah.
Well, it could be.
Yeah. Again, there's so many ways to go, but you do have to factor that in, right? If you unexpectedly pass, your parents are still alive. Are they the priority or your children are priority? You have to decide that. But that's, again, why you need a good financial plan, a good estate attorney to help you walk through those scenarios. But those are factors in the decision.
And part of what you're talking about, too, and why working with a planner or having that team approach, too, I mean, the worst scenarios are where you have aging parents and one passes. The survivor's the one trying to deal with the estate. They might still be listed on everything, and they might be in their 80s, 90s, or older as well. Right. And you have them listed as executor, trustee, things like that, perhaps. And you're the one going through trying to help them. then perhaps something happens to them within that first year of losing their spouse for a long-term spouse. That commonly happens. And now you're stuck perhaps with younger children trying to balance career life and then deal with two estates at once. So the idea of, is it clean? Are the right people listed? Mom and dad, if I'm in this plan, do I have the documents? Do I know where things are? Sometimes that seems like an aggressive question. Hey, where's the stuff going?
tough
Right,
conversations.
but that's why you have to review it constantly. It's not just one and done. Estate planning is not one and done. You're reviewing it regularly when there are major life events and factoring in, are the people named in my estate plan do they have the ability to follow through with what their roles and responsibilities are? So you have to understand, if you're named an executor, okay, what does that mean? What is that for my responsibilities, or an agent? So there's a lot of different things, a trustee. So what are those responsibilities, and can that person carry out those responsibilities, and are they willing to do it too? Right? Because that's all part of the equation.
On that note, though, and typically listed, and this is where you want to speak to an attorney, but it may not be mom or dad's job, or they have to do that. They may have the ability to say, no, I don't want to do that. Let it pass to the next person in line. And that relieves a lot of stress sometimes if they're comfortable with that. And depending upon the situation, they may not know that, or may assume that that's their burden to carry. So again, really thinking about, if you're in that situation where you've got those elder parents and you're trying to help out, there might be a conversation to be had to say, maybe I can run with this, and maybe it's not even you, but you working with an attorney.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, have you ever encountered or know anybody that just assigned or aligned somebody and didn't tell them or invite them to
That's the worst. Yeah, it does
You just kinda
happen.
plop somebody
right?
in your-
You name somebody and then don't tell them. That's the worst case scenario. So if you do name somebody, whoever is named in your estate plan, you've got to make sure they know. Like, just even guardianship. Somebody named, if I had kids and I named you as guardian, your first question to me is like, okay, great. Do you have life insurance? Like, what happens if you die? Do I just assume the
No,
parent?
my first question would be, what are you thinking about? Why am I just finding out about this now?
Right, but those are the questions asked. So it is a comprehensive approach. It's not just, you're just not doing your estate plan documents. There's a process, and you have to play out the what if scenarios.
Yeah, that would be a
What
nightmare.
if I die? What if I'm incapacitated or something? You have to play that out.
And again, why wouldn't you tell Tracy if you're that human in a human relationship? Oh my gosh, is Tracy going to tell a family member, another sibling, or somebody that I didn't pick? And now there's going to be family strife, drama, whatever. Again, these things commonly
that might
come
be
up.
motivation not to. That's
Well,
interesting.
and it is, and then think about it beyond that. So now you're not here, and they're fighting over it. So it doesn't really go away. It's just the idea, though, that sometimes people duck their heads in the sand or don't want to have that conversation. But having that conversation and being able to deal with it while everyone's here, hopefully that's the best way to do it. And then it's never relevant, and you know what you were doing.
Yeah.
Now, Stephen, you said earlier to check your estate planning often.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of a career, let's say you've got your foundation set and you're in the middle of a career, and then time passes and your career grows and your wealth amasses, and maybe you have a couple of kids, things become a little more complex. You buy a vacation home, whatever formula it is. At what point do you recognize that what you have isn't enough?
Right. That's why you review it.
Is it possible
But-
for the average person to really do that? Or is it
Maybe.
just automated, just check it annually?
Just check it annually. Know who's listed as people who are going to be responsible. Are they still fit to carry out that role? And then if you have a major life event, again, that's where having a good financial planner or having a good financial plan, you're on top of it. And maybe the kids are at a point where they can help with the medical decisions. They're in their mid to late 20s. One might be a doctor or a nurse, and they understand medicine. So maybe they're suited. So you bring them in. You don't have to worry about mom and dad or siblings being an agent. So you've got to review it often, and maybe you don't have to change anything for 5-10 years. That's fine, but just review it.
And then the other part is you're probably not going to review it right. I
Yeah,
mean, being
in
real,
reality,
we talk
right,
as financial
yes.
planners. We do that. That's where our minds are. But that's why you hire a financial planner, because you're going to be able to go through a process to say, am I in the right spot? Tax laws have changed numerous times. State tax laws change. You know, when do you get that prod to go talk to your attorney because, hey, there's now this new property or inheritance tax or something like that? Again, even with the best intents of you sitting down every December 31st going through your estate plan, if you're not current or you're not following it, you might be doing yourself a disservice by saying, well, I don't want to pay that attorney hour. I don't want to do that. Again, when you think about on the back end, the hours involved in probate or the probate costs or even taxes, that's where when you look at that and sit down with a professional, usually it speaks for itself.
Yeah. And maybe your goals changed, right? Maybe you said, now I want to leave some to charity as an example. Okay, can you do that? Could be able to do that through your estate plan in a more tax efficient manner. There's so many ways this can go. So that's why it's all intertwined. That's why financial planning it's a comprehensive approach. It's not just here's your estate plan and it has no other impact on other areas. It does.
Yeah.
And it ties in with your goals.
And some of you probably have seen some horror stories yourself, but I know of a situation where somebody passed away and they had a pension, and we do podcasts about pensions too, so tune into those. But they had a pension and they had a beneficiary IRA buried in the pension. So when the power of attorney, the executor, whomever, went in to change all of the beneficiaries after the person had been divorced, that pension was buried. That beneficiary IRA was buried in that pension and nobody knew. So when that person passed away, it threw everything into probate because of that one little tiny element that wasn't changed. So the beneficiaries are a big one.
Oh, big time.
That's a big part of the estate.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And that's why whenever there's a life event, you have to review everything. And is a beneficiary listing a part of your estate plan? Sort of, but it's not tied to the estate documents, but everything, again, is comprehensive, right? So listing of beneficiaries is a critical piece.
Well, and again, we're talking about it. These are the realities too. Perhaps you've had a sibling that might have passed earlier and you think about mom or dad's estate plan. Maybe they had children as well. We talk about these key Latin words. I won't even go there, but how does the estate get split up? What happened? All right, per stirpes.
Okay.
That's one. Okay, we'll
Yeah.
leave it there
Let's
for now.
Right.
But,
All right.
with Catholic school coming out. The idea, though, of when you set things up and when you check those boxes for beneficiaries, again, we live and die by that. We breathe in that. But when you're filling it out on the fly to look it up to say, well, if my siblings passed, or perhaps it's your parents' estate, you're helping them out. If a sibling had passed and they had 3 or 4 children, well, are there going to be 3 or 4 new heirs in total? Are they going to share that other spouse's 1/4 or 1/3? These are real decisions too, and depending upon their ages, and maybe there's another situation involved too where there might be a special need or someone's a little different. That's all going to play into how do they elect their beneficiaries, and really looking at that's so important.
Right. And you'll see situations where people, before they're married, they'll list a significant other, girlfriend, boyfriend, and that relationship ends. And then something tragic happens, and then the parents are saying, well, this is our account. And, well, no, they named this other person who's not a part of their life anymore. Legally, it's theirs.
And vice versa, too. If you're in a relationship, mom and dad don't approve, well, then they're getting your money. We saw that with one legal settlement even where, someone was killed right after their wedding and the parents fought and basically with the spouse there. And again, I think there was a settlement there, but the idea of clear estate planning, it's not automatic. There are things that are automatic and they go to the state laws. And we'll talk about that later, but there is a plan if you don't make one.
Yeah. That actually takes care of my last question that I was going to ask, and that's basically there is a real risk of leaving old documents in place. So be attentive to that.
Yeah.
Let's explain to people how the CFP helps coordinate moving parts with the other professionals like the attorney, the tax professional, because a lot of times in our industry, people confuse CPA with advisor, financial advisor, and they're not the same. They're not synonymous. So at what point do we let's assign some roles. Let's kind of
So-
give people a visual.
All right. So the way I jump into this is based on even how we approach financial planning. We believe it's a continuous communication. And by continuous communication, you really start to talk to people and understand their goals, understand how they're wired, and say, okay, you give a lot to charity, or this is your family dynamic. And we can say, remember when you said this, or bring in perspective. That way, when they talk to the attorneys are really, they come in and they really don't understand the people. You need a will. Okay, great. Here's your will. But what are your goals? It's all intertwined. So a good financial planner will say, here are your goals. And then you can intertwine your estate plan based on the goals at hand. So that's why the financial planning process is so important. It all starts with your goals, and the goals. It's not just about I want to retire at 65. This is how I want to leave a legacy and whatnot.
And the CFP we're talking about too is that certified financial planning professional. So the idea of there's that overarching person to say, how do I work this in with the business or the accountant or the business accountant, even the life insurance agent, who's helping coordinate all these moving pieces so that one thing I forgot about, that simple IRA at my old dealership, did I update the beneficiary so it didn't kick off to probate? You know what, if you're looking at your listing of your assets and you're doing that regularly, again, it's by having meetings on the calendar, by doing it as part of a regular process. But that's how you hopefully avoid those loose ends. And part of what we're saying, too, is keeping things private.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you do it all the right way. You can keep things private.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you have tentacles pretty much everywhere to protect the client.
Right. We're not here to make the decision for the client, but we can provide perspective. Like I said, the attorney's just coming in to draft what they wish, but they may not know what they're signing up for if they just sign what they wish, what the attorney thinks. Because there's a lot of that. And a simple example might be, I want to leave money for my grandkids. Okay, great. How old are the grandkids? They don't maybe even bring up that conversation, but maybe the grandkids are 10 years old, right? And do you want a 10-year-old getting a sizable amount of money? So again, all of those things have to be factored in. And that's why it's through a conversation and it's not black and white, cut and dry.
I know you love templates, Stephen. I'm sure
right.
You love the templated approach of estate planning. And that's sometimes when you
now you're seeing a lot of advertising for that, right? On the internet.
Right. No,
right?
Fill in this questionnaire and we'll spit out a plan. And a lot of what you're sharing, though, there might be other ways to do things other than a standard approach.
Yeah.
And if you talk with someone about, I have this long-term partner, we live together, we want this house for either of us to live in, but at the end of the day, divvy it up. I almost guarantee if you do one of those fly-by-night estate plans, it's not going to account for that. Now, check me on that. Read that. If you're in that situation, look at your document. But typically, that's what you're paying for by sitting with a person.
Yep.
All right. We've given people some food for thought. You can't predict life, but it sounds like if you got a strong plan together, you're going to be ready for those milestones and life changes. Thanks for joining us. We hope you come back.
Boxland Media. Think big,